As he pushed the demand paper back over the counter, the supply clerk scowled. "Why don't you go find a real Marine to sign this for you, my love? Listen, I have no time to feign with the assistants." Despite the scorching sensation in her chest, Corporal Riley Montgomery maintained a steady voice. Quietly, she folded the Purple Heart citation in her back pocket. Behind her, the Navy SEAL had been observing the entire interaction, and his next move would send shockwaves through the entire armory. Riley Montgomery, age 23, pushed the industrial mop across the main armory building at Camp Loon's polished flooring. Her utility uniform had the fading patches where the combat patches had formerly been proudly displayed, and her auburn hair was tucked back in a regulation bun. Most passersby thought she was just another maintenance worker going about her usual business. As Marines and visiting Navy SEALs got ready for combined training exercises, the armory was a hive of activity. Riley walked stealthily between the supply stations and the weapon racks. Her motions were deliberate and accurate. For the last 6 months, she had been tasked with facilities upkeep, a job that kept her occupied but made her feel unnoticed by the combat forces that occupied the building every day. The concrete floor was covered in lengthy shadows as the early sun shone through the tall windows. Riley was determined to finish her work before the afternoon rush, so she had arrived early as usual. She didn't have any awards or ribbons on. Her current uniform that would draw attention to the stellar service record that was hidden in her personnel file. She was just the calm young woman who kept their office tidy to everyone around her, driven by a desire to serve something greater than herself. Riley had enrolled immediately after graduating from high school in small-town Tennessee. Her grandpa served in the Marines in Vietnam, and his tales of sacrifice and fraternity had sown the seeds of an unwavering sense of responsibility. She had been with the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force as a combat medic during her first tour to Afghanistan. It was during her second trip that things changed. Outside Helmand Province, her convoy had collided with an improvised explosive device. Riley had crawled into the death zone 3 times, pulling wounded Marines to safety as enemy fire rained down from nearby hills, and her fellow Marines lay wounded, despite suffering a gunshot graze across her ribs and shrapnel to her left shoulder. She saved 4 lives that day. In her mind, those moments seemed to extend for hours, even though the engagement lasted only 47 minutes. To her, the Bronze Star of Bravery and the Purple Heart that followed meant the world. Seeing those 4 Marines return home to their families, however, was the true prize. But she was now assigned to non-combat tasks due to her injuries and the after-effects of post-traumatic stress disorder. She felt as though she was losing a piece of herself during the transition. Riley, however, remained steadfast in her conviction that every Marine job was important. She continued to serve her country and fellow Marines. Whether she was preserving the facilities where others trained for fight or saving lives on the battlefield, before Riley had to request cleaning supplies from the main armory storage, the morning began as any other. She brought her normal request form, which she had filled out countless of times, to the supply window. Sergeant Davis, a career supply specialist behind the counter, had never deployed, but exuded the haughtiness of someone who felt he was better than others because of his service in the United States. When Riley slid the form across the counter, Davis hardly gave her a glance. He slowly and deliberately scanned the papers, then looked up with a sneer that made Riley's stomach knot. She would never be able to forget the talk that ensued. "Hey, darling, how about you go get a genuine Marine to sign this for you? With the assistants, I don't have time to pretend." His voice was loud enough to be heard by everyone in the supply room, including the Navy SEALs who had been silently going over equipment lists nearby. Riley's cheeks began to flush, but she spoke with a calm tone. "I am a Marine, and I have the right authorization to ask for supplies," she informed him. The sharp sound of Davis's laughter reverberated off the metal shelves. "Maybe she should stick to women's work instead of wasting my time," he remarked, adding that push. "A mop around does not make someone a true Marine." Riley felt the comments as if they were actual blows. Under impossible circumstances, she had saved lives while under enemy fire. However, she had never been in a fighting situation as humiliating as this one. Conversations had ceased around them, Other Marines obviously listened to every word while feigning to concentrate on their work. With all of their attention now on the conversation at the supplies counter, the Navy SEALs had fallen silent. To help us and to hear more amazing stories like this one, please subscribe to our channel. Your assistance enables us to commemorate the accomplishments and sacrifices made by our country's heroes. Davis persisted in his verbal abuse, advising Riley to look for another position that better fit her skills, perhaps a job in laundry or food service. Every word was deliberately intended to minimize and reject her sacrifice, her service, and her value as a Marine. Riley's fists gripped the edge of the counter so hard that her knuckles turned white as she stood still. Emotions smashed together, like storm waves inside her chest. She felt both comforted and crushed by the familiar weight of the Purple Heart citation in her back pocket. Her military career's highs and lows were captured on that sheet of paper. Davis, however, would never look past the mop she was holding. She was reminded of that day in Afghanistan when her squad was pinned down by machine gun fire. Ignoring the bullets that kicked up dirt inches from her face, she recalled the taste of blood and dust in her mouth as she crept toward her injured siblings. Back then, she had shown courage by concentrating solely on rescuing lives and finishing the goal. However, courage seemed to live only in her recollections as she stood in this armory, surrounded by other Marines who said nothing as she was. Humiliated. The way the other Marines in the room avoided looking into her eyes was worse than the insults themselves. It's likely that some were aware of her story and had heard about the battlefield medic who had been awarded a Bronze Star for her bravery. Others merely saw what Davis saw, a young woman performing maintenance who was unworthy of their regard or deference. Telling them about the Marines she had rescued and the blood she had bled for the Corps was something Riley wanted to do. After months of feeling forgotten and invisible, the words remained lodged in her throat. She had come to terms with her new duty and swallowed her pride. But every boundary she believed she had set was put to the test in this moment. Davis's refusal to grant Riley's request for a requisition caused an intolerable pause in the armory. With dramatic contempt, he tore up her documents and let the fragments fly to the ground. Other Marines started to shuffle uneasily, but nobody came forward to stop it. Riley was surrounded by a wall of inaction brought about by the bystander effect and the unspoken standards of military authority. She made another attempt to clarify that she had the right authorization and only need basic cleaning products to complete her task. With an increasingly hostile and loud voice, Davis interrupted her in the middle of her speech. He advised her to find out where she is in the military food chain and warned her to quit wasting everyone's time. More employees were congregating to watch her degrading treatment, and the humiliation was turning into a public show. A tall man with quiet eyes and worn features, one of the Navy SEALs, had been observing the entire encounter with his jaw tensing up. As Davis intensified his verbal assaults, his teammates became aware of his growing agitation. The SEAL's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, his impulse to step in when something was obviously wrong, battling with his training. Riley's eyes threatened to well up with tears, but she fought the urge to let them fall. Here. Over the preceding few months, she had shed many tears in solitude as she struggled with emotions of meaninglessness and lamented the loss of her fighting position. However, she refused to allow Davis the joy of witnessing her total collapse. Davis's suggestion that Riley may be more beneficial in a whole different type of service was the tipping point. His connotation was obvious and repulsive. Something fundamental changed in the atmosphere of the room as the words lingered in the air like poison. While some Marines were truly astonished, others started muttering to themselves that Davis had gone too far. Finally, the Navy SEAL who had been observing had had enough. After 4 deployments, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Chen earned his trident via blood, sweat, and undying devotion to his fellow service members. Every value he placed on military service and respect for fellow soldiers was broken by what he was. Seeing Chen advanced with a purposeful, authoritative stride. As he made his way to the supplies counter, the crowd became hushed, his presence exuding the power that only proven combat leadership can provide. He reached down and gently picked up each piece of Riley's ripped requisition form off the floor without a word. Davis began to object, but Chen's icy gaze instantly cut him off. Despite speaking softly, the Seedle's comments were audible throughout the armory. He told Davis that he had just witnessed him dismiss a Bronze Star and Purple Heart recipient, a Marine who had taken enemy rounds herself and saved 4 lives under enemy fire. Davis's expression was instantly and completely shocked. Chen went on to say that Riley had shown more bravery in a single afternoon than most individuals do in a lifetime by repeatedly crawling across a kill zone to save injured Marines. He had done his research, witnessing the altercation while surreptitiously looking up Riley's service history on his phone. Delivered with the accuracy of a military briefing, every word he said was confirmed to be true. Then came the moment that everyone in the room would never forget. Chen revealed his main weapon, a rifle worth $416 Hong Kong dollars, and gave it to Riley right away. "A warrior of her caliber deserves to carry a weapon, not push a mop," he said, stepping aside. A Navy SEAL willingly disarming himself in remembrance of a fellow service member who had been overlooked and fired was an uncommon gesture. The symbolism was instantaneous and potent. A warrior's weapon is considered sacrosanct in military culture and is never shared or given away carelessly. By doing this, Chen made it clear to everyone in attendance that Riley deserved not only respect, but also the greatest honor he could bestow. Stunned quiet broke out in the armory, followed by a slow murmur of shame and realization. Marines who had been silent while Riley was humiliated now came forward, a number of them quietly apologizing for their lack of action. Behind his counter, Davis stood with a pale face and a deflated sense of pride. He struggled to process Riley's new requisition form. As he attempted to maintain some dignity in the face of the circumstance, his hands were shaking. Riley's hands trembled slightly when he took Chen's rifle, not out of fear but out of intense emotion. She felt appreciated and acknowledged for who she really was, not just for the work she was doing for the first time in months. The weight of the rifle in her hands brought back memories of her deployments and missions as a Marine. Chen gave a brief speech to the Marines gathered, emphasizing the value of seeing past outward manifestations and identifying the fighters within. He acknowledged that every veteran carried invisible fights and deserved respect regardless of their present assignment, and he highlighted his personal problems, juggling combat and support responsibilities. In Camp Loon, news of the tragedy spread swiftly. After hearing the account, Riley's old commanding officers and war friends called her within hours. The leadership of the Marine Corps also took notice and began a covert inquiry into the disrespectful, a culture that had let such treatment to go unchecked. Riley most significantly experienced a return to her sense of purpose and belonging. When given the opportunity to be heard, she understood that her military record spoke for itself and that her current employment did not reduce her value as a Marine. Riley was sent to a training position 3 weeks later, where her battle background would help new Marines getting ready for deployment. It wasn't sympathy or pity that brought about the shift, but rather the realization that her knowledge and abilities were being squandered on maintenance. She started imparting battlefield tactics and combat medicine knowledge to the upcoming generation of fighters. Riley and the entire base culture underwent a sea change as a result of the armory event. New initiatives were introduced by senior leadership with the goal of honoring and acknowledging the varied service histories of all employees, irrespective of their present duties. In addition to additional training on military etiquette and respect, Davis underwent official therapy. Riley returned Chen's gun with a handwritten message of appreciation after keeping it for precisely 1 hour. She felt acknowledged as a warrior without having to carry his weapon. The fact that someone had valued her and been prepared to speak up when others had remained silent was what counted. The true lesson was straightforward, but impactful. Every veteran has tales of bravery, sacrifice, and duty that may not be immediately apparent. Seeing the warrior within and having the guts to speak up when that fighter is being disregarded or neglected are essential components of true military brotherhood.